Chapter 12, Sorcery and Sudden Vengeance. Meanwhile, Trumpkin and the two boys arrived at the dark little stone archway, which led into the inside of the mound. And two sentinel badgers, the white patches on their cheeks were all Edmund could see of them, leaped up with bared teeth, asking them in snarling voices, "Who goes there?" "Trumpkin," said the dwarf, bringing the High King of Narnia out of the far past. The badgers nosed at the boy's hands. "At last," they said, "at last." "Give us a light, friends," said Trumpkin. The badgers found a torch just inside the arch, and Peter lit it and handed it to Trumpkin. "The DLF had better lead," he said. "We don't know our way around this place." Trumpkin took the torch and went ahead into the dark tunnel. It was cold, black, and a musty place, with an occasional bat fluttering in the torchlight and plenty of cobwebs. The boys, who had been mostly in the open air ever since the morning at the railway station, felt as if they were going into a trap or a prison. "I say, Peter," whispered Edmund, "look at those carvings on the walls. Don't they look old? And yet we're older than that. When we were last here, they hadn't even been made." "Yes," said Peter, "it makes one think." The dwarf went on ahead and then turned to the right and then to the left and then down some steps and then to the left again. Then at last they saw a light ahead, light from under a door. And now for the first time they heard voices, for they had come to the door of the central chamber. The voices inside were very angry ones. Someone was talking so loudly that at the approach of the boys and the dwarf had not even been heard. "Don't like the sound of that," whispered Trumpkin to Peter. "Let's listen for a moment." See the picture? All three stood perfectly still outside of the door. "You know well enough," said a voice. "That's the king," whispered Trumpkin. "Why, the horn was not blown at sunrise this morning. Have you forgotten that Menez fell upon us almost before Trumpkin had gone, and that we were fighting for our lives for the space of 3 hours and more? I blew it when I first had breathing space." "I'm not likely to forget it," came the angry voice, "when my dwarves bore the brunt of that attack and 1 in 5 of them fell." "That's Niberick," said Trumpkin. "For shame, dwarf," came a thick voice. "Trumfle hunters," said Trumpkin. "We all did as much as the dwarfs and none more than the king." "Tell that tale your own way for all I care," answered Nickabrick. "But whether it was that or the horn was blown too late, or whether there was no magic in it, no help has come. You great clerk, you master magician, you know all. Are you still asking us to hang our hopes on Aslan and King Peter and all the rest of it? I must confess, I cannot deny it, that I am deeply disappointed in the results of the operation," came the answer. "That'll be Dr. Cornelius," said Trumpkin. "To speak plainly," said Nimbrick, "your wallet's empty, your eggs addled, your fish uncaught, and your promises broken. Stand aside then and let others work. And that is why—" "The help will come," said Truffle Hunter. "I stand by Aslan. Have patience, like us beasts. The help will come. It may be even now at the door." "Puh," said Nibbrick. "You badgers would have us wait until the sky falls and we can all catch larks. I'll tell you, but we can't wait. Food is running short. We lose more than we can afford at every encounter. Our followers are slipping away." "And why?" said Truffle Hunter. "I'll tell you why. Because it is noised among them that we have called on the king of old, and the kings of old have not answered." The last words Trumpkin spoke before he went most likely to his death were, "If you must blow the horn, do not let the army know why you blow it or what you hope from it. But That same evening, everyone seemed to know. You'd better have shoved your gray snout in a hornet's nest, Badger, than suggest that I'm a blab, said Nibrick. Take it back or... Oh, stop it, both of you, said King Caspian. I want to know what it is that Nibrick keeps on hinting we should do. But before that, I want to know who these two strangers are whom he has brought into our council and who stand there with their ears open and their mouths shut. They are friends of mine, said Nibrick, and what better right have you yourself to be here than that you are a friend of Trumpkins and of the Badgers? And what right has the old dotard in the black gown to be, except that to be your friend? Why am I the only one who can't bring in his friends? His Majesty is the king to whom you have sworn allegiance, said Trufflehunter sternly. Court manners, sneered Nibrick. But in this hole, we may talk plainly. You know, and he knows that this Telmarine boy will be king of nowhere and nobody in a week unless we can help him out of the trap in which he sits. Perhaps, said Cornelius, your new friends would like to speak for themselves. You there? Who and what are you? Worshipful Master Doctor, came a thin, whining voice. So please you, I'm only a poor old woman, I am, and very obliged to his worshipful dwarfship for his friendship, I'm sure. His Majesty, bless his handsome face, has no need to be afraid of an old woman that's nearly doubled up with rheumatics and hasn't had 2 sticks to put under her kettle. I have some poor little skill, not like yours, Master Doctor, of course, in small spells and cat trips and things that I'd be glad to use against our enemies if it was agreeable to all concerned, for I hate 'em. Oh yes, no one hates better than me. That is almost interesting and satisfactory, said Dr. Cornelius. I think I now know what you are, madam. Perhaps your other friend, Nibrick, would give us an account of himself? A dull gray voice, at which Peter's flesh crept. I'm hunger, I'm thirst. Where I bite, I hold till I die. And even after death, they must cut out my mouthful from my enemy's body and bury it with me. I can fast 100 years and not die. I can lie 100 nights on the ice and not freeze. I can drink a river of blood and not burst. Show me your enemies. And it is in the presence of these two that you wish to disclose your plan, said Caspian. Yes, said Nibrick, and by their help, I mean to execute it. There was a minute or two during which Trumpkin and the boys could hear Caspian and his two friends speaking in low voices, but could not make out what they were saying. Then Caspian spoke aloud. Well, Nibrick, he said, we will hear your plan. There was a pause so long that the boys began to wonder if Nibrick was ever going to begin. When he did, it was in a lower voice, as if he himself did not much like what he was saying. All said and done, he muttered, none of us knows the truth about the ancient days in Narnia. Trumpkin believed none of the stories. I was ready to put them to the trial when first tried the horn, and it has failed. We first tried the horn, and it has failed. If there ever was a High King Peter and a Queen Susan and a King Edmund and a Queen Lucy, then either they have not heard us or they cannot come, or they are our enemies. Or they are on the way, said Trufflehunter. You can go on saying that till Miraz has fed us all to the dogs. As I was saying, we have tried one link in the chain of old legends, and it has done us no good. Well, but when your sword breaks, you draw your dagger. The stories tell of other powers besides the ancient kings and queens. How about if we call them up? If you mean Aslan, said Trufflehunter, It's all one, calling on him and calling on the kings. They were his servants. If he will not send them, but I make no doubt he will, is it more likely he would come himself? No, you're right there, said Nibrick. Aslan and the kings go together. Either Aslan is dead or he is not on our side, or something stronger than himself keeps him back. And if he did come, how do we know he'd be our friend? He was not always a good friend to the dwarves by all that's of old told, not even to all beasts. Ask the wolves. And anyway, he was in Narnia only once that I've ever heard of, and he didn't stay long. You may drop Aslan off of the reckoning. I was thinking of someone else. There was no answer, and for a few minutes, it was so still that Edmund could hear the wheezing and shuffling breath of the badger. What do you mean? Said Caspian at last. I mean a power so much greater than Aslan's that it held Narnia spellbound for years and years, if the stories are true. The White Witch? Cried the voices all at one time, and from the noise, Peter guessed these three people had leapt to their feet. Yes, said Nibrick very slowly and distinctly, I mean the witch. Sit down again. Don't all take fright as if the name as if you were children. We want power, and we want power that will be on our side. As for power, do not the stories say that the witch defeated Aslan and bound him and killed him on that very stone which is over there and beyond the light? But they also say that he came to life again, said the badger sharply. Yes, they say, answered Nibrick, but you'll notice that we hear precious little about anything he did afterwards. He just fades out of the story. How do you explain that? If he really came to life, isn't it much more likely that he didn't, and that the stories say nothing more about him because there was nothing more to say? He established the kings and queens, said Caspian. A king who has just won a great battle can usually establish himself without the help of a performing lion, said Nibrick. There was a fierce growl, probably from Truffle Hunter. And anyway, Nibrick continued, what came of the kings and their reign? They faded too, but it was very different with the witch. They say she ruled for 100 years, 100 years of winter. That's power, if you like, and something practical. But heaven on earth, said the king, haven't we always been told that she was the worst enemy of all? Wasn't she the tyrant 10 times worse than Miraz? Perhaps, said Nibrick in a cold voice, perhaps she was for you humans, if there were any of you in those days. Perhaps she was for some of us of the beasts. She stamped out the beavers, I dare say. At least there are none of them in Narnia now, but she got on all right with us dwarves. I'm a dwarf and I stand by my own people. We're not afraid of the witch. But you've joined us, said Truffle Hunter. Yes, and a lot of good it has done my people so far, said Staff Nibrick, who was sent on all the dangerous roads. The dwarves, who goes short when the rations fall, shorts, the dwarves, who lies, said the badger, all lies. And so, said Nibrick, whose voice now rose to a scream, if you can't help my people, I'll go to someone who can. This is open treason, dwarf, said the king. Asked the king, is this open treason? Said the king. Put that sword back into its sheath, Caspian, said Nibrick. Murder at council, eh? Is that your game? Don't be fool enough to try it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? There's 3 on my side and 3 on yours. Come on then, snarled Truffle Hunter, but he was immediately interrupted. Stop, said Dr. Cornelius. You go on too fast. The witch is dead. All the stories agree on that. What does Nibrick mean by calling on the witch? The gray and terrible voice, which had spoken only once before, said, oh, Is she? And then the shrill, whining voice began. Oh, bless his heart, his dear little majesty. Needn't mind about the white lady. That's what we call her, being dead. The worshipful master doctor is only making game of a poor old woman like me when he says that. Sweet master doctor, learned master doctor, who ever heard of a witch that's really died? You can always get them back. Call her up, said the gray voice. We're all ready. Draw a circle, prepare a blue fire. Above, the steadily increasing growl of the badger and Cornelius's sharp, what? Rose the voice of King Caspian like thunder. So that is your plan, Nibrick. Black sorcery and the calling up of an accursed ghost. And I see who your companions are, a hag and a werewolf. The next minute or so was very confused. There was an animal roaring and a clash of steel, and the boys and Trumpkin rushed in. Peter had a glimpse of a horrible gray, gaunt creature, half man, half wolf, and in the very act of leaping upon a boy about his own age. And Edmund saw a badger and a dwarf rolling on the floor in a sort of fight. Trumpkin found himself face to face with the hag. Her nose and chin stuck out like a pair of nutcrackers. Her dirty gray hair was flying about her face, and she had just got Dr. Cornelius about the throat. At one slash of Trumpkin's sword, her head rolled on the floor, and then the light was knocked over, and it was all swords and teeth and claws and fists and boots for about 60 seconds, then silence. Are you all right, Ed? I think so, panted Edmund. I've got that brute Nibrick, but he's still alive. Weights and water bottles, came the angry voice. It's me you're sitting on. Get off. You're like a young elephant. See the fight? Sorry, DLF, said Edmund. Is that better? Ow, no, bellowed Trumpkin. You're putting your boot in my mouth. Go away. Is King Caspian anywhere? Said Peter. I'm here, said a rather faint voice. Something bit me. They all went ahead. They all heard the noise of someone striking a match. It was Edmund. The little flame showed his face, looking pale and dirty. He blundered about for a little, found the candle. They were no longer using the lamp, for they had run out of oil, set it on the table and lit it. And when the flame rose clear, several people scrambled to their feet. 6 faces blinked at once at one another in the candlelight. We don't seem to have any enemies left, said Peter. There's the hag, dead. He turned his eyes quickly away from her. And Nibrick dead too. And I suppose this thing is the werewolf? It's so long since I've seen one. Wolf's head, man's body. That means he was just turning from man into wolf at the moment he was killed. And you, I suppose, are King Caspian? Yes, said the other boy, but I've no idea who you are. It's the High King, King Peter, said Trumpkin. Your Majesty is very welcome, said Caspian. And so is your Majesty, said Peter. I haven't come to take your place, you know, but to put you into it. Your Majesty, said another voice at Peter's elbow. He turned it and found himself face to face with the badger. Peter leaned forward, put his arms around the beast, and kissed the furry head. It wasn't a girlish thing for him. Wasn't a girlish thing for him to do because he was the High King. Best of badgers, he said, you have never doubted us all through. No credit to me, your Majesty, said Truffle Hunter. I'm a beast and we don't change. I'm a badger, what's more, and we hold on. I am sorry for Nibrick, said Caspian. though he hated me from the first moment he saw me. He had gone sour inside from long suffering and hating. If we had won quickly, he might have become a good dwarf in the days of peace. I don't know which of us killed him. I'm glad of that. You're bleeding, said Peter. Yes, I'm bitten, said Caspian. It was that wolf thing. Cleaning and bandaging the wound took a long time. And when it was done, Trumpkin said, now, before everything else, we want some breakfast. But not here, said Peter. No, said Caspian with a shudder, and we must send someone to take away the bodies. Let the vermin be flung into a pit, said Peter, but the dwarf, we will give him to his people to be buried in their own fashion. They breakfasted at last in another of the dark cellars of Aslan's house. It was not such a breakfast as they would have chosen, for Caspian and Cornelius were thinking of venison pasties, and Peter Edmund of buttered eggs and hot coffee, but what everyone got was a little bit of cold bear meat, and out of the boys' packs, a lump of hard cheese, an onion, and a mug of water. But from the way they fell in, anyone would have supposed it was delicious.